Hey everyone and welcome back. I actually checked out the new Matrix film, The Matrix Resurrection. No relation to Halloween Resurrection, although the two of them maybe do have a little bit more in common than I originally thought. And that is in regards to whether or not each film actually really needed to be made. Now, of course, the original Matrix, which came out back in 1999, which is hard to believe it was 22 years ago, was a surprise hit and, of course, is really today, I would consider it very much a classic. Absolutely amazing film, one that I still think holds up so well. And obviously from the success of that, it went on to have two more sequels, which, well, outside of, at least my own personal opinion, outside of a couple of sequences and scenes that are cool overall, I think they left a lot to be desired. I know a friend of mine at the time had said in regards to Reloaded, the second film, that it's a film that sort of drowns in its own BS. And I think that's pretty much an accurate way to put it. And actually over the years, I kind of feel like that The Matrix Revolutions, the third one, actually holds up a little bit better. But neither film obviously comes anywhere close to the original first film, which probably should have just been its own film. But nonetheless, we do have the trilogy, and now, of course, we have a fourth film. Now, The Matrix Resurrection does bring back Keanu Reeves in the role of Neo, but now we see him sort of living a day-to-day life. He works as a game programmer who had invented a game called The Matrix, which did include sort of all the elements that we saw, of course, in the original films. And there is a bit of sort of semi-meta aspects going on here, where sort of portions of the original films were actually like part of the game that he created. And he's going through kind of a rough spell because he's seen a therapist and trying to decide whether or not everything that happened in the first three films, like, did that really happen, or did he just create it for the game? And now he's sort of having a hard time sort of struggling as to what is real and what isn't. Meanwhile, he goes to a local coffee shop, and there he sees Tiffany, who looks just like Trinity, and the two of them sort of feel like they have met before. And there are other characters who are infiltrating this world, much like in the original Matrix, and they're trying to find Neo to try and sort of bring him back. And it's kind of thing where it's like, we're now back in the Matrix, and there's even a scene where Neo gets a message from someone saying he has to meet, and while the building that he's in is being raided with the police, and the messages are telling him where to go, again, mirroring a scene in the first film where he gets into the bathroom and then he finds this character of Morpheus, which is not Lawrence Fishburne, but indeed a character that used to be an agent that is now Morpheus, but he only exists in the Matrix. So where some of this stuff kind of gets a little complicated because it's sort of reintroducing characters, but they're not the same character, but they are, but they're not. But at the same time, we're sort of mirroring the same thing where it's like, here's Neo living in this world, and then he gets contacted and he's given the choice again. It's like, do you want to continue living in this world, or do you want to see the truth, the blue pill versus the red pill? And the film pretty much almost follows some of the same things where it's like, okay, he's reawakened now and he literally is in the pod and all that, and yes, he is still alive despite the end of Revolutions, where he been kept alive, and that is something that they do kind of cover in the story as to why. Not actually a bad idea as to why they decided to set that up, but the film itself does follow the elements of the first Matrix. So you kind of do feel like you're sort of retreading ground. And that's why I kind of felt like this was very much like The Force Awakens. Well, it's like, yeah, it has its own stuff going on, but at the end of the day, it's like you're kind of almost retelling the same story, just changing certain elements around. And we are introduced to a couple of new characters, which are okay. They're not as interesting. They're just sort of there. But we're 60 years later, so some of the characters from the original film are no longer around for a reason because it's 60 years later, and where other ones have just gotten old. And there's even an Agent Smith character who, again, is Agent Smith, but he's not, but he is, but he's not, but he kind of is. Like, some of it gets a little much. When the characters are not played by the original actors, it's kind of hard to be like, wouldn't it be better if they were somebody new rather than just the same character with a different skin? And of course, the majority of the film is Neo as he's sort of accepting the fact that, much like in the first film, it's just like, okay, so this is reality, and, the Matrix is the Matrix, and his main goal is to find Trinity and rescue her, but they're not sure if she's going to accept the fact that, you know, she's not Tiffany, but actually Trinity, and that she does actually want to leave the Matrix and everything. Something a little different, but at the same time, it's also kind of the same thing. Because the thing is, there are a couple of interesting ideas that maybe if they were fleshed out a little bit more, would have been a little bit more interesting in the long run. I mean, I kind of feel like this is something that actually would have worked better more so as almost like a limited series, like a streaming thing on like HBO or something, or if it had like a 6 or 7 episode run where they could explore things a little bit more than in a 2.5 hour movie. Not that it would have been like a lot better, but I think at least some of the ideas that could be interesting would have been fleshed out a little bit more. The thing is, you never feel like things are at stake as much. Like at least with the first 3 films, it felt like everything was sort of at stake and there was, you know, a lot going on, and they felt like, you know, kind of big epic films. And I don't mean that even from a budgetary standpoint, but just in the fact that everything going on does affect so much more than just the characters that we're following. And I never really got that sense with it. In fact, if anything, it felt very small, despite it obviously being, you know, a big movie. Everything felt small. It literally felt like it was a streaming series, which was interesting because outside of a couple moments here and there, more so in sort of like the last third or so, there was nothing really overly cinematic about the film. Interesting because the other films were very cinematic, and I don't mean in gimmicks, you know, sort of like the slow motion or the bullet time or anything like that. There's just a sense of the cinematic, which I kind of feel like is a bit of a losing art form in general. And this has been going on for a while. This isn't something recent. This is something I've sort of sensed with films really over for a very long time. It's something I actually want to do a video on pretty soon, on how much I kind of feel like we're losing the sense of the cinematic when it comes to films. And again, that has nothing to do with budget, because you can have a very low budget film and still have a sense of the cinematic. But it's definitely a lost art form, I kind of feel like, or one that's not as prevalent as it used to be. But that's a subject for another time, but this is definitely a film that I kind of feel does suffer from that. It just, nothing ever really felt like super cinematic. Now, while the film does tease the possibility of another film, it also kind of also ends where it, like, you know what, it could also end right there and it would be okay. Kind of like the first Matrix, almost exactly like the first Matrix, where it's like, you know what, just leave it as is. I don't think this needs to continue on anymore. So much like with The Force Awakens, which sort of mimics the original Star Wars, and then sort of goes off in weird tangents in, obviously, with The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, and it just becomes kind of a big mess. I don't want that to happen here. If anything, just let this film kind of stand on its own and just end it, and it just almost becomes more of a footnote in the long run. The thing is, this film is not bad. I mean, the thing is, it's like, I mean, I don't know if it's worth going to the theater to watch it. I mean, if you have HBO Plus, you know, yeah, it's just taking into account it is 2.5 hours. But if you want to sit at home and watch it, most of you probably will have the same feeling I did, where it's just like, you know, I saw it. All right, I've seen it. But that's the thing. At the end of the day, I kind of feel that's all it is. It's just, I can just say I've seen it. Now, again, this is all just my opinion. I mean, if you love the Matrix movies, obviously, I think you should see this one. You may even enjoy it. You may even enjoy it quite a bit. And I hope you do. I never like to persuade anyone from not seeing a film. And if I never want to tell anyone that their opinion about a film is wrong, I always hope for the best, you know. But at least for me, this film just really just didn't work. So if you've seen The Matrix Resurrection, definitely let me know your thoughts. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.